it is one of my missions to make sure that people don't forget the first half of Game 3 when the Memphis Grizzlies were up by 26 on the supposedly invincible Oklahoma City Thunder. And it's possible the Thunder win this series against the Pacers coming up in 5 games, whatever the case might be. But I will never forget watching those Grizzlies do what they did to the Thunder, because that is what, maybe not blowing them out, but competing with the Thunder. That is what the expectation was going into the season, and it was just a flash in the pan reminder of just how far they fell overall beyond that potential.
All right, welcome back to the Daily Basketball Recap Season Recap Edition. Today we are here with myself, Levi Jacob, and Joe Mullinax. Joe, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Absolutely. That was perfect. First try.
Yeah, amazing. I didn't even ask him before, so I just went for it on my first try. Joe is the host of our friends at Locked On. He is the host of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. There are few people in the world who know more about the Grizzlies and who can speak about the Grizzlies season than Joe. You got to be in the 1%, Joe. No, I mean, how many people podcast about the Grizzlies? Let's say it's you, it's Ja Morant's mom. There's not so much more than that.
Come on now. It's a little bit wider than that. We have a decent little corner of the internet.
Yes, they're a pretty active corner, by the way. A lot. Grizzlies fans end up on my feed a lot.
I believe that completely.
Yeah. So let's talk about their season, and then we'll get into the categories in a little bit later. The Grizzlies were 48-34, but an 8 seed because the West is super competitive.
Sure.
They lost to the Golden State Warriors in the first round of the play-in, and then they beat Dallas. And they made the 8th seed, lost to OKC in 4. It was an underratedly competitive game 3, but then Ja went out, and that was it. They fired their coach, Taylor Jenkins, March 28th, with 9 games left in the season. And Morant who's been, we could talk about him for days, but he had all his stuff going on, but he ended up playing 50 games this season and then injured in the playoffs. So I guess, Joe, we'll start with you. Maybe give us brief thoughts on this season. You could include the playoffs and give me maybe a letter grade.
Sure. The grade would be a D for me. I think it's fair to say it was a disappointment, especially considering where they were. It was a tale of 2 seasons, right? This was a team that in January, Jaren Jackson Jr. wasn't just going to be on the All-NBA team. He might have been second team All-NBA in terms of how impactful he was as a two-way player. You had a Grizzlies team that looked like they were returning to the 2 seed in the Western Conference, which before the blip of last season, that had been what they were, right? We recently talked about, myself and my co-host Michael Cole, on Locked On Grizzlies, we talked about how the Grizzlies were the Thunder before the Thunder were the Thunder, right? People forget the 73-point shellacking that several members of this OKC team, several years ago, they were on that team when the Grizzlies beat the tar out of Oklahoma City. And, Memphis had been the 2 seed for 2 straight years. Memphis was having ESPN Day, where everybody from ESPN was doing shows in Memphis, Tennessee. Ja Morant was the face of American basketball. And then everything fell out. We don't have to revisit all that. Chances are, folks are checking out this podcast, they're familiar with the fall from grace of Ja Morant, at least to this point. So it looked like a return to that. When Ja was on the court, the games that he did miss this year were injury-based. No suspensions, no trouble of any kind in that regard. But he was banged up a lot throughout the season. So when he did miss time, it was Jaren who was kind of leading the charge, and he was good enough. Desmond Bane was doing some good things. Santi Aldama had a career year, ironically, in a contract year. It's crazy how that works out. You had lots of guys doing a lot of good things, and then the last 30 games of the season, they went 13-17. Their head coach gets fired. They go in a completely not different direction because Tuomas Isolo was on the staff, but it's one of those situations where the team underachieved compared to what expectations were, and the team underachieved compared to what Grizzlies GM Zach Kleiman expected of the talent on the roster. Marcus Smart was traded for, and that trade was an abject failure. I don't think anybody really faults him for trying because Marcus Smart is a former champion. It's hard to praise the Alex Caruso trade for the Oklahoma City Thunder, for example, and see the greatness of that. Marcus Smart isn't quite Alex Caruso, but he's not as far, at least 2 years ago. He wasn't as far his way in the eyes of NBA analysts as it turned out he was. So it's important to point that out, that hindsight is always 2020, but the Marcus Smart trade didn't work out. G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. got injured, and the Grizzlies bet that they would come back healthy and they would be contributors to this team, and they just weren't. So they limped into the playoffs without Jalen Wells, without Brandon Clark, and they just didn't have the depth to compete, much less beat a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder or even a team like the Golden State Warriors. But to your point, and I'm so proud of you for saying it, I genuinely mean this. It is one of my missions to make sure that people don't forget the first half of Game 3 when the Memphis Grizzlies were up by 26 on the supposedly invincible Oklahoma City Thunder. And it's possible the Thunder win this series against the Pacers coming up in 5 games, whatever the case might be. But I will never forget watching those Grizzlies do what they did to the Thunder, because that is what, maybe not blowing them out, but competing with the Thunder. That is what the expectation was going into the season, and it was just a flash in the pan reminder of just how far they fell overall beyond that potential.
Totally hear you. I want to ask this, which you didn't talk about. A D feels a bit harsh to me, and this is my counter on why maybe not. Is I think the West is just stacked, and they had 48 wins. They were 2 wins away from the 3 seed and 4 wins away from the 2 seed.
It's not good enough.
My question is this:
it's not good enough. They paid 3 guys almost $500 million. When you have that much money invested in 3 dudes, when you have made the choice that those are your guys, and I hear what you're saying, and I'm sorry to cut you off. You can't have it both ways, right? You can't say Ja Morant is a superstar and then make excuses for him when he falls short of that. You can't say that Jaren Jackson Jr. is striving to be a super max contract player, and then when he completely falls off the last 30 games of the season and falls short of that goal, that there has to be, you can't say we have these great talented guys, and then when they don't, for whatever reason, when they don't achieve what the goal is, they may not be the Oklahoma City Thunder, but losing to the Golden State Warriors the way they did, that's a disappointment. That was not the expectation. That might have been the expectation of people outside of Memphis. But I can tell you right now that the reason that Taylor Jenkins got fired is because it was the expectation that they were going to be better than they were. Taylor Jenkins is still employed by the Memphis Grizzlies if they are better than what they were. And in a season where you fire your coach with 9 games to go, it's hard for me to give them anything above a D.
I like it. So I guess let's start with biggest moment of the season, positive or negative. We'll go round robin. So we'll go Joe, Levy, me. Joe, you're up. Biggest moment of the season.
Biggest moment of the season was trading Marcus Smart and essentially a salary dump. Okay. And in fairness, some people noticed this at the time. I'll admit that I did not. I thought that they were betting on Vince Williams Jr., G.G. Jackson, and Zach Kleiman said that in his postseason media off-season, end of season media availability. They were counting on G.G. and Vince, and they weren't able to be what Memphis needed them to be. But in hindsight, trading Marcus Smart in the 2025 first, which I think turned out to be the 18th pick in the draft, taking that to offload Marcus Smart for Marvin Bagley, who barely played, and other pieces that were never part of the process for Memphis, at least not this season, that was a sign that they acknowledged they weren't good enough. So that should have been at the trade deadline where I said, okay, season's over, right? Like that should have been the moment. That was it. It wasn't for a lot of people, myself included, and I think that adds to the disappointment. But again, with the clear sight of hindsight, that was the turning point in the season. It was kind of the doom knell for Taylor Jenkins. It was just an acknowledgement that this team's not good enough, and they were focused on trying to get the team as good as they could, because there's no denying that now they have the flexibility financially with their own draft capital beyond this draft. They have all of their assets. they can do more things now with Marcus Smart off their ledger, but it essentially doomed them for this season.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think my moment would be more game based. I think it was April 3rd. You can correct me if I'm wrong. The John Morant layup to win the game. It felt a little bit like I think it was a much needed win for what felt like the Grizzlies team that, again, I think went underappreciated. We were talking about it beforehand, like before we came on. The Grizzlies were, they won 48 games. Like you said, it's not as good as you want them to be, but at the same time, you want to see how the offensive scheme works with Ja being the engine of the offense and Jaren Jackson Jr. out there, and the team gelling together. And I feel like it was in a way, like a breath of fresh air. Um, I thought it was an important highlight that ultimately could have catapulted them farther into the playoffs. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But yeah,
And I'll say the moment that it was already mentioned twice, but I just think it was such a giant moment was the game three, both leading by 29 points and then blowing that lead, because what happened in that moment was it was game three. So they always say you don't, the playoffs don't start till you lose a game at home. So when the Grizzlies were up 29 points in game three, their first game at home, Grizzlies fan. I'm assuming you can speak for Grizzlies fans, but NBA fans were what I was thinking was, I don't know, maybe this Grizzlies team is just better than we think. Maybe Ja is, even he wasn't even playing that well, but maybe he's like another level. Maybe this team runs it back. Maybe there's not so much to fix here if they could be up 29 points in game three, round one against the Thunder with this like scariest one seed, in so long and blah, blah, blah. And then they blew that, and it's like, and then Ja gets hurt, and it's like, I don't know what the Grizzlies are going to do the offseason, and we'll get to that later. But I think that game three was the moment where it was just like, we cannot run it back. Like, we cannot just, this team is not getting us to the finals. We got the scary Thunder team. We have Wemby coming. We have 7 other teams tied with us in the West, basically for the same record. We need to do something.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
I want to say though, to their credit, so I don't want to start any kind of beef here. I happen to be an Oklahoma City fan. But that being said, the Grizzlies was the team that I didn't want to see them in the first round. They're a team that is so dynamic in what they can offer on a night-to-night basis. I don't think they had enough reps fully, everyone together, to figure out exactly what they could provide on the floor. But just because you mentioned Wemby, also, like, I just feel like because they have Edie, because Bane is usually playing better than the end result that we got, because you have, Jaren Jackson Jr., who, if you need him to be on offense or on defense, he's able to provide that. They're a very formidable team to anybody. Like, it was surprising to me that the Thunder dealt with them how they did, but against any other team, I thought they would have put up definitely more of a fight. So I feel like it's worth giving them a little bit of credit.
Well, I mean, again, it would have been a gentleman's sweep at the very least if Lou Dort hadn't undercut Ja Morant, and it was accidental. I think he pretty clearly slipped, but it doesn't change the fact that he undercut him. That's the physical definition of what he did. So, I mean, the Thunder weren't coming back in that game. The energy in the building was completely different. They might have won game 4. They might have blown him out in game 5, might have ended in 5. But no one will ever be able to convince me that comeback happens if Ja Morant doesn't get hurt. And that's the reality of it. But that's something that Memphis has to weigh, right? You're paying this guy a superstar contract. Is he worth that money? To a lesser extent of the Luka Doncic situation, because I think it's pretty clear he is. I would argue it's worth it for Ja too. We'll probably talk more about that here in a moment, but I would imagine that's part of the question. It's one of the reasons I get sent trade requests and mock drafts for Ja Morant. Right? Is he worth it to Memphis anymore? I think he is, but he has to be able. The greatest ability in life sometimes is availability, and Ja hasn't done that for some time for these Grizzlies for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, on to the next topic. So now we'll go snake style. So it'll be me, Levy, Joe. Most enticing player. So for me, which his name was barely mentioned so far, and I think we got to give him a shout out, is Zach Edey. Um, Zach Edey, I think, at least for me, you could speak to this more, Joe, but exceeded expectations as a rookie.
I mean, some people
He
thought he
just
was the worst
became
draft pick in the history of the NBA. So, yeah, I would say he's exceeded that when those people say those kinds of things.
right. Well, I actually thought it was a great pick at the time. Like when they picked him, I was like, oh, that's like he could be one of the best guys in the draft. But he's 7'4". He's like a defensive anchor. And when you just have him and JJJ in there, when JJJ is kind of like has this on-off thing. Like when he's off, he's really off, but when he's on, he's like top 10 player in the league. So he's a bit confusing. But when Edey and JJJ are just there defensively, it's scary. Like who's attacking the rim? And he's a rookie, so that's like very exciting. He's just going to get better. He had a great first season. He finished all rookie team, and I'm just a big fan of Zach Edey.
I wanna push off my pick to Joe because I'm stuck between two people, and if you take one of them, then I'm safe. Then I don't have to choose.
Well, I like the Edey pick. I'm an Edey guy. I wanted Donovan Clingan in the interest of full disclosure in the draft, but I was fine with Edey, especially once I heard the ridiculous backlash to him. Because again, he's 7'4" and we're playing basketball. Sometimes we overthink this a little bit, right? Like we have podcasts and analysts and all these different avenues where people can consume content. Sometimes if you're really tall and really big, you can do things that are important in basketball that involve being really tall and really big. And Zach Edey can do those things. And I don't want to belittle his skill set because he has skill as well. But again, sometimes it's a simple game. And I think the way that the Grizzlies moving forward are going to want to play, Zach Edey is going to be a huge component of that. So I'm with you on Edey. I like Jalen Wells. Jalen Wells would be my pick because you could very easily argue another first team all NBA rookie. And that's something to remember about these Grizzlies. They started two rookies that both made all NBA rookie first team. Wells, for a time there, was the leader for rookie of the year. And he is easily, in my opinion, the best value pick, the best pound for pound selection in the 2024 NBA draft. This is a second round guy who 2 or 3 years ago was playing Division II basketball at Sonoma State. And now you're talking about somebody who is a legitimate starter for a team that has aspirations of competing in the Western Conference. Not many young players can say that. So his frame, the way that he competes defensively, his mentality, he just checks so many boxes for this Grizzlies team moving forward. I don't think he's enticing because I think he's going to be a superstar. He doesn't have that physical ability. He has the ability to be, as my partner on the podcast, Michael says, an elite role player. And Memphis needs that. They need an elite role player, kind of like a Brandon Clark. If that is his ceiling, a wing Brandon Clark, then Brandon Clark has played a lot of freaking good basketball for the Memphis Grizzlies, and that's huge. So I went with you on Edey, but Jalen Wells for me pops off as someone who's going to be a key piece moving forward, a core piece.
Yeah, I'm glad that I then let you take that because Jalen Wells to be at times a primary perimeter defender also is like he really showed out. He really showed. He's very impressive. He was also so I'm going to say this with the preface that it's not the max of the hindsight that we have, but this season for him reminded me a little bit of Shea's rookie season with the Clippers. Just because, again, not the superstardom and all this, not ready to make that
He's
call.
Certainly not the ball handler or anything like that.
But more so from the standpoint of a rookie who came in able to really contribute to winning basketball and hit tough shots and defend at the right times and really make the game his. Like you saw what a more polished version of him could be in a few years, and he's so important to this team, and the injury was just so unfortunate towards the end of the season. Like you always hope that all these teams are going in healthy into the playoffs because it's so much more fun to watch when everybody is healthy. And I think that he's a very, very enticing player. The other one that I would go with, which maybe for the majority of Grizzlies fans is not necessarily the same way. I love Scottie Pippen Jr. He he plays basketball the way I like basketball to be played. Like, you really ask of him something, and he was really able to go out and deliver it. And I thought, especially guarding Shea, you saw it throughout the rest of the playoffs so far. I don't, I, it's very hard for me to really think singularly of somebody that was able to create so much difficulty for Shea without fouling him. And the fouling is, obviously a whole other discussion, but he did a very good job of just being a glove, you know. And I was very impressed with him all season, and especially when it came time for him to be on the defensive side of the ball. Excellent player, really.
How much he's able to be a point guard versus a combo guard, because he wants to score, right? If you watch him enough, he wants to be that scoring guard. That's going to be a major question for him, but he's a key reserve moving forward. I see him being in that mix with the Grizzlies for some time. And again, whether it's Pippen Jr., Jalen Wells, there's several names that the Grizzlies, they've struck out on some first round picks the last few years. But second round picks, guys coming out of the G League, Zach Kleiman, that's where he thrives. He's found several really good players there.
Yeah.
Okay, most underrated player. By the way, I was gonna have Scottie Pippen Jr., but now I'll switch it up. I love Scottie Pippen Jr. I have nothing to add to what you both said because he's awesome, but he was gonna be my most underrated. So I think my second most underrated player would be Desmond Bane. I think that he's right there. He with like what Klay Thompson was in his prime, but is not getting the credit because the Grizzlies aren't winning like the Warriors won. But if you put Desmond Bane in the Klay Thompson spot in like that whole Warriors era, I'm not sure it's so different. Like, I just think they're both really, really skilled. But people talk about Klay Thompson like he's a future Hall of Famer, I think because of the Warriors winning. But Desmond Bane just like, oh yeah, he's a solid shooter. I think he's excellent. And when he's on, he's just really, really on. And I think people underrate him because the Grizzlies don't win enough. And Ja is I think Ja is a worse version of Curry, but I don't think Bane is a worse version of Klay. And I think Bane is awesome.
The Grizzlies are also in Memphis, Tennessee, right, which is the 51st largest market. Like, you can be a star anywhere in the NBA now, right? Ja's proving that. Giannis has obviously proved that. Market size isn't everything, but when you're the third best player on the smallest market team in the NBA, you're going to go underappreciated. That's just kind of the reality. I'm a big Desmond Bane guy. I think that he's miscast, and that might be one of the biggest sins of Taylor Jenkins, is they've asked him to do so much secondary facilitation, and he's able to do it, right? Like, he's able to play with the ball in his hands, create offense for others. That is something that I thought was underappreciated coming out of TCU when he got drafted in 2020. But I think they've gone too far in the other direction now. Like, Klay Thompson was never asked to be the backup point guard for an extended period of time for those Golden State Warriors teams. Desmond Bane has absolutely been asked to be that guy. And I have a problem with that. I think that Desmond Bane has to go back to being that 3-point marksman, where that is where his focus is. And the secondary creation becomes tertiary. Instead of a second facilitator of offense, he becomes a third guy, and you kind of replicate it in the aggregate in other spaces. I think that they're pushing him in a direction that isn't where he is best used. And I do think that might be a positive of Tuomas Isalo, because if you watched his teams in Europe with Paris basketball, so much of what he did was set off of a young, explosive point guard and a big that set good screens. Well, Memphis has Edey and Morant, and they have the foundational pieces there. Put Bane back in a spot where he is taking 8 to 10 threes a game and let that be his primary focus. And I think you see him bounce back a little bit in that space. There's no doubt that he can create off the dribble. He can do a lot more things. But what made him elite, you mentioned Klay Thompson. Outside of Curry and Thompson, the last 5 years or so until this past season, there was no better three-point shooter in the National Basketball Association than Desmond Bane. And I think that got lost a little bit this year in this offensive transition, that hopefully that comes back under Isalo.
Levy, most underrated?
I think that I don't know how you see this team and you don't feel that JJJ is the most, like, he was an all-star. He was, at times during the season, a lot of the time, the most consistent scorer that they had. He was really doing it on all three levels also. He was really, really an excellent player while also defensively really being such a cornerstone as well. Definitely this year less than last year, but he really is such a. I remember when he was coming into the league, a lot of the comparisons that people had of him was a Kevin Garnett type, and I just didn't get it. I, Not that he's all the way there, but I'm starting to see it more now. I like the aggressive nature that he came on offense with this year, and I just feel like he's not in enough conversations. He's such a talented basketball player, and he's proving it on the court. I definitely think he's underrated.
He's predictable. That would be my one thing that makes him flawed. And we all have flaws. That's important to point out. But where I would like to see his game grow, he puts his head down too often. He just drives blindly, not looking to pass. Where Pascal Siakam does similar things coming up with the finals here, Siakam will drive and make that extra dish to somebody in the corner, or he'll see a double coming and find the open man. Jaren just doesn't do that. So I think that he's predictable at times, but that's also testament to what you were saying, that he has specific things that he needs to add to his game, and yet you can't stop him. He's Giannis light. He's not Giannis. He certainly doesn't rebound like Giannis, but when he gets his head downhill, because he's 6'11", 245 pounds, and can handle, there's very few people that can actually stay with him, and he's a constant mismatch. If you put a big on him, he's going to fly right by him. If you put a wing on him, he's going to be able to bully them, and that's just a real advantage that he's been able to take advantage of more often than not.
Joe, let me ask you something about JJJ. I'm
Sure.
wondering this from a Memphis fan, of someone who watches every game. I hate that the NBA doesn't have like some sort of red zone thing where I could kind of watch everything, because I just either watch the highlights or,
Sure.
and these are things you can't pick up in the highlights.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he have so way fewer blocks this season than in previous seasons? 2 years ago, he averaged like 2.1.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was like 1.6. This year is 0.5. What happened there?
Part of it is being asked to do so much more offensively, right? Like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that's one of his biggest strengths, is how he's an above average to even really good defender, despite having such a large usage rate offensively. That's just really hard to do. So when you're asked to do more on one end, it's natural that something's going to tail off a little bit defensively. I also think it's scheme, right? A couple years ago, he had Steven Adams, who was just, you want to talk about underrated. I think he's one of the most underrated basketball players in the history of the NBA in terms of how he contributes to winning. It's not flashy, but he rebounds and he screens. He understands defensive alignments and rotations and where to put his body. And he's elite at being big. I would say that all the time about Steven Adams. Zach Edey can be that, but obviously he was a rookie, as you guys talked about. He has things that he needs to learn in terms of his rim protection. The year before that, we didn't have Zach Edey. So you're looking at Jaren playing a lot more of the five. And while ideally, I think positionally, Jaren as a five makes a ton of sense, he isn't that guy. He just isn't at this stage of his NBA career. He's not the rebounder that you need at your five. There's things that he doesn't do well enough to be that. So I think it's a mix of scheme, a mix of responsibility change. But as Edey improves and they trust him more as that back end of the defense, I think you can see him being more of that weak side block mongerer that he was a couple of years ago. But he was, when Victor Wembanyama went down due to injury, it's important to point out that the leading defensive player of the year better or option was not Evan Mobley at that time. Again, it was Jaren Jackson Jr. Like, Jaren was the favorite immediately after Wemby's injury, because it's going to be Wembanyama's every year until he gets tired of it. But once Wemby went out, it was Jaren's award to lose. Obviously, he lost it, but he was still having a really impressive year despite those numbers being down a little bit, and that's an acknowledgement of his defensive impact.
Okay, did you pick you didn't pick an underrated one, Joe, right? Did you pick
I think
one?
you guys nailed it with the guys you said. I think those are fair.
Okay, great.
And to be honest with you, Santi Aldama is somebody that could probably check that box. He had a really good season, but there's also reasons that Santi is he going to be re-signed by the Grizzlies? I think that just in terms of assets, he probably needs to be, but That's somebody that at 6'11", another floor spacer, did really good for Spain internationally before the season. That's someone to keep an eye on.
Okay, so we're gonna do one final question
Perfect.
before we wrap up. If you were the Grizzlies GM and the Bucks GM gave you a call and said, "Give me your best Giannis offer," Giannis wants to go to Memphis. We just need a good offer to make it happen. What is your best offer for them?
Or would you hang up also? That's another
You could
option.
also
Hang
you
up.
could be like,
I
oh, you
would
could be like,
most
oh,
certainly
never.
not hang up.
Yeah.
My best offer. I think realistically, Memphis could get it done if they offered Bane and Jaren. But I think that becomes an issue because you can't count on Ja or Giannis to be 3-point shooters, right? So if you move on from two guys, in the case of Bane, I made the argument a little while ago that he's one of the best 3-point shooters in modern NBA history. So if you believe that, keeping him would be nice in this state. Jaren, obviously a better 3-point shooter than Giannis as well, but Giannis is better than both of those guys. And imagine a Giannis Ja pick and roll, right? Like that's probably going to be pretty impossible to stop. But Jalen Wells can be a 3-point shooter, of course, on the perimeter. Our boy Zach Edey alongside Giannis. There's another non-floor spacer. So I think it's an imperfect fit if you did a Bane and Jaren mix. So I couldn't do that. I would let I would let Milwaukee pick which one of those two guys they wanted between Jaren and Bane. And then whatever they wanted to do to match salary beyond that, so be it. If it was Edey, then so be it.
So putting salary aside, would you do this? Would you do, let's say, because I think if I'm Milwaukee, this is like enticing. The apron confuses me. So
Sure.
if the response is this doesn't work with the salaries,
I
that's
understand.
fair. But it's just for the fun of it. Giannis for Jalen Wells, Zach Edey, and JJJ. And basically, the Bucks, you go all in right now, and you have a Ja, Giannis, and Bane big three. And the Bucks are like, hey, we have a great young core right now. We got Edey, we got Wells. JJJ is only 25, 26. So that could be a win-win for both. So if you're the Grizzlies GM, what do you say to that offer?
As a core situation, I like it. Wells is where it trips me up a little bit. Because with Giannis in particular, I think moving on from Edey, that stings. But again, it's Giannis, right? But you have to find as much floor spacing around that guy as possible. Keeping Bane, I think, helps. You lose a major point of attack defender. The Grizzlies don't have many of those. We saw that in the playoffs. That was one of the things that killed them against the Thunder. Wells would have been huge against OKC. Again, do I think the Thunder win that series still? Yes, I think they still win the series. But Wells would have made it tougher on OKC. So I am hesitant to say that I would include Wells. But again, that sounds stupid to say out loud because it's freaking Giannis, right? So would it be the end of the deal for me? Probably not. But I would hopefully get something back in the form of some sort of ability, whether it's a draft pick, whether it's, they take on a little bit of extra money like a John Conchar. So I have the ability to go out in free agency and sign somebody. That would be what I would try to do. But again, it's Giannis. This is one of the top 5 players in the NBA, if not top 3. You probably are pulling that trigger because you've got him alongside Ja. But it's also such a huge bet on Ja, right? And I don't think people are wrong because in Memphis, Ja Morant is a made man, right? People love the guy, and he is easily the most talented player that's ever played for the Memphis Grizzlies. It's not really close. But availability is the greatest ability. And this is somebody who has not played more than 60 games, I think, since his rookie year, something like that. So you are counting on a guy to be a guy, even if it's in the Kyrie role next to LeBron James, if you were able to bring in Giannis, right? You're counting on somebody to be there that hasn't been there these last couple of years. And that's a major bet. So this would be a doubling down on the Ja era. And if it doesn't work, you're back to the drawing board.
All right. I like it, Joe. Thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully we could have you back maybe around the off-season time. We'll talk about that stuff then.
That'd be great.
See after the free agency.
Sure.
But it was great having you. It's our honor and privilege. The Grizzlies are great. Like they're like you were saying about the honest, they just have an underrated amount of assets, and I think they're underrated. Just the Grizzlies in general, they're underrated. They have a lot going for
The
them.
Grizzlies have the ability to be involved in these conversations. Are there teams like the Rockets and the Spurs, the Thunder, obviously, that can do a little bit more? Yeah, absolutely. But I see Memphis as a team that like slides in as a third team. They can do that very easily. And anytime you want to get on the trade machine and just have a little fun, the Grizzlies as a third team make a lot of sense in a lot of these trades.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate
it. You guys.
All right.
Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.